Appreciate you taking the time out to do this interview. Can you give an introduction to let everybody know who you're speaking with?
Marlin Gusman, Marlingusman.
You're the former sheriff of New Orleans.
Yes, I was the former sheriff of New Orleans from 2004 to 2022.
When I interviewed Derrick Groves and Antoine Massey's family and friends, they tend to be sold on and really believe that their capture won't be peaceful if he's caught, right? And then there's
they're gonna kill him. I believe they're going to try to kill him. I'm no longer trying to be humble about it.
When I say survive, I ain't saying stay free. I'm talking about survive, because man, them people gunning for them dude. They ain't really trying to catch them alive, dog.
I'm afraid of that. It appears to me that after looking back on it, over these last 10, 11, 12 days, that the ones who had the plan, and that the other ones probably jumped on a moving train, and they actually may have been decoys, for the masterminds. And somebody like Derrick Groves, he's facing a life sentence, and he's convicted of some violent crimes. He may not go peacefully, and I'm sure glad that the other ones were able to be captured without any violence or bloodshed. Massey, he's escaped before from the juvenile facility and also from Moreland Correctional Center.
When you say you have a history of what?
They say he escaped before out of different facilities.
Shit.
Before the Juvenile Justice Intervention Centre became what it is today, in 2007 Antoine Massey escaped from here. Police found Antoine Massey on the Interstate 10 service road in eastern New Orleans.
He didn't really have the type of charges where he would be looking at a life sentence. So but he's definitely appears to be someone who likes to escape. When you think about it, and of course I couldn't count all of those people running across the interstate. They didn't end up on that side. The way New Orleans is, it's really separated by that highway, and there's only a few ways over it. I mean, of course you can cross it in the middle like they did, but these guys ended up. There was video of them down in the Central Business District, Massey and Groves, and another guy. I want to say it was Van Buren, but I don't know if they split up now. I would guess they probably have. Van Buren definitely split away. He ended up in Baton Rouge.
Right.
But I think Massey and Groves are in it for the long haul.
Did you hear the recent news that they were spotted in, I believe it was Mississippi, I believe?
I heard that there was a possible spotting of Massey in Natchez, Mississippi, but I don't think anything has yet come of it. Okay.
Here's another thing I want to know, right? What does the charges look like for escapees?
Well, escape charge, simple escape, they're probably looking at between 5 and 10 years, but you don't know the whole story right now because, there may have been, something they did with the correctional officer, with the janitor. You don't think about time the way other people think about it.
Another thing crossed my mind, right? When these guys first got out, because you paint this picture, right? And you say these guys, 2 guys could be the mastermind because it's playing out that way. Do you believe they had help set up prior to them escaping?
Absolutely, yes. Whereas I said, I don't know if the other ones did, and that's why up to 13 people are now arrested because, they made some plans with them and made contact with them, and they were ready. Once you're on the run, you gotta have either help or a hell of a plan. The U.S. Marshals, they have a net, and the FBI, other law enforcement agencies. There's only so many places you can hide. I don't think they're still in Louisiana. It's my thought, but I'm not conducting the investigation. I'm more a bystander.
I know this might be a little weird, but do you have any advice to those who may be considering helping Derrick and Antoine?
Oh, I would tell them don't do it because, look, they're going to get caught. And unfortunately, most of the time when it happens, the ones who get caught are the ones who turn them in. And that's a sad truth, but that's the truth.
Has this ever happened in New Orleans or Louisiana or even American history? A breakout of this magnitude?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
Like I said, when we were in these temporary facilities, tents, we had a few people that got out, cutting the tent, but we got them back. The same way with a building we had called the House of Detention. A couple of people got out of there, but it was not constructed or designed, and it was a building built back in the 40s or 50s. So it didn't have the security electronics and didn't have the the redundant systems. Not making excuses, it happened, and things happen.
I knew that Derrick Rose was he had like 2 or 3 life sentences, right? And another big thing in the comments where people was like, why was he in New Orleans in the first place? Why wasn't he in Angola?
My understanding is that he had not been sentenced yet. When someone's arrested for a state offense, like murder, attempted murder, it is a responsibility of the parish to house that person. When they get convicted, still the responsibility of the parish. And it's not until the judge pronounces sentence that day they become the responsibility of the state. And that's when it kicks in. Now, I think you got to dig a little deeper to find out why they hadn't been sentenced since October. I've heard some stories, but nothing, reliable enough for me to repeat.
Okay.
But obviously that's 5 or 6 months waiting for someone to be sentenced, and that's typically not what happens. And I can tell you that if we had someone who got a life sentence, most of the time, once they got that sentence, they would be getting a escorted ride up to the state facility to hunt.
Let's say Derrick and Antoine is listening, right? And let's just say your word carries weight. It's something that you could say that would create an effect that would bring this thing to an end, right? Do you have any advice to them or anything that you would like to say to them?
I would tell them, look, turn yourselves in for the good of yourself and your family, that you're eventually going to be caught. And in the meantime, don't bring other people down with you. In the meantime, look, this incident has gotten so much publicity and attention that they're going to have to do and give attention to the people that helped them. In other words, those people are going to end up serving time, which means they're going to get away from their families, their children. It's a sad part of it.
Massive manhunt after a stunning jailbreak in New Orleans. 10 inmates escaping, some charged with murder, all considered armed and dangerous.
The thing about being armed and dangerous, is that something that the media just has to say to cover all bases, or?
Well, no, I think you have to assume as a law enforcement officer and, talking to the public that, certainly they have had enough time to get weapons, and they have a history, at least Scrove says, of having weapons. So, I don't know of anything other than that, but I think it's safe to say that, you have to consider them to be armed and dangerous until you know better.
You personally have any run-ins? Because I know the Groves family have a deep history in New Orleans. Any run-ins or conversations, any background with that family?
No, I was actually kind of surprised to hear that Derrick Groves was the grandson of Kim Groves. And I was the city's chief administrative officer. when the former police officer Len Davis put a hit out on her. So that's about my only connection.
Hey, I have to ask this too, right? You especially under the circumstances, do you, even away from that, do you ever consider or think about coming back, if possible?
I do consider it, yes.
Wow. What brings that into you?
Well, a lot of people have been encouraging me to do it, but we'll see. And I'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay, so it's a possibility.
Sure.
Yeah, because I said that the length of time you've been in there, man, I'm like, Susan hadn't been in there that long, and they try to compare the situation, but there's no comparison with that, so.
No, she was over her head when she came in. I went through Katrina. I was sheriff for 8 months when Katrina hit.
In 2005, behind the walls of the Orleans Parish Jail sat thousands of people. 2 days before Hurricane Katrina hit, alerts started.
Can you walk us through what that was like in your position going through Hurricane Katrina?
Well, we had over 5,000 inmates at the time, and we had 8 or 9 buildings that they were in, separate buildings. When Katrina hit, really there wasn't much damage to the buildings. However, the security electronics were compromised, and the city was without water, city was without sewage service, city was without electricity. So that next morning, we made a decision to evacuate all of the inmates, and we evacuated all of the inmates without any loss of life or injury by Thursday morning.
Because I know there was a lot of criticism going on, especially during the ending of your term and everything. That was criticism brought by my opponents, but right. Go ahead. And no, it was surrounding the conditions of the prison, right, and all the attention that went to that. And then we hear in 2025.
No. You see, in 2015, we opened a brand new facility with electronic security systems, with cameras, over 900 cameras, and we closed all of the outdated buildings that we had been using. It was really quite an ordeal. Anyone who was criticizing, they weren't in the shoes that we were in, which was trying to do a whole bunch of things while we were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no time off or anything.
All right, and understanding that, right, we saw how beautiful the prison looked and everything. So when I said come to 2025, how could something like this happen? As far as a 10-man job?
I think it was just a complete failure to maintain the building, to have the discipline, within the building. It's really almost unbelievable to me that they would let the building get into this kind of disrepair, and then to lie about it and say that it needs all of these upgrades, it needs this. I mean, look, if you ever own a home or do anything like that, things wear out, and especially if you're using a building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you have to maintain it. That's just common sense, It's just, ridiculous to say that it was the building's fault. It's not the building's fault. You have to maintain it.
Could something like this happen on your watch at that time? Could something like this happen? And if not, why not?
That's why we built this building. We built this building with the security electronics, with the, redundant systems. We built it as a direct supervision facility, just for that very reason. Look, I was in, as I told you, in temporary buildings and outdated buildings, and we had a couple of people that left out, and escaped, but nothing like this, nothing, 10 people in the jailbreak. It's a very secure building, right. But like anything else, if you don't maintain the you can put an alarm in your house if you don't turn it on. It's not going to do you any good.
Exactly. Hey, what were you thinking when you first heard the news, before the facts came out, and you get the news? What's going through your mind?
I just said there must have been a complete failure of the system. The failure to watch it, failure to listen to the system, and just a failure all around. And then I heard that there were some help from people inside. That didn't surprise me. But even with the help from the inside, there were enough systems in place that this shouldn't have happened.
When I'm reading comments, I get a lot that due to the way they escaped, is it possible they had law enforcement help?
I saw these jail cells being built, and they made them with rebar, and then they poured the concrete in, about 4.5, 5 inches of concrete, toilet and everything. The toilets were bolted with 6 bolts to this concrete. No, they couldn't have happened without help, because you're not pulling a toilet off the wall. You're not digging through this concrete to make a hole. I mean, I heard a lot of things.
Yeah, now with clippers anyway. They say they use hair clippers, which was really weird.
That's obviously someone who's, just, spinning the tail. They didn't use clippers.
Right.
You had to have some sort of industrial grade tool to cut through this rebar, and then you had to have the bolts loosened or removed on the back of the toilets. But even then, you would be in a secure pipe chase, and if that pipe chase door is open, then the alarm would go off. And then, of course, you saw, just like everybody did, cameras were there. Cameras were working. Yeah.
Right. Well, why do you think it took so long for them to report it? You say 8 to 10 hours, because I'm sure they had.
What was another breakdown? See, there should have been. First of all, it was after 10 o'clock. There shouldn't have been any inmates out after lockdown, especially on a housing unit like that. And they shouldn't have been on the first floor. But there shouldn't have been any people out of their cells. There were at least 10 people out of their cells. That should have not happened. Secondly, there should have been bed checks during the night, and certainly there should have been a bed check at roll call.
Beautiful interview, man. Is there anything else that you want to add that you feel maybe we left out or didn't?
No, look, I was straight up and to the point, and I think you just have to, when you interview other people, you have to look at what they're saying and say, hey, is this really true?
Yeah, I believe it may be necessary to come back. It may be necessary for you to come back. Yeah.
We'll see.